Hello and welcome to Founders Unplugged. I am your host, Greg McCallum, also known as the Pay-As-You-Scale Commercial Advisor. Before we start, just wanted to let you know all these conversations are completely voluntary by the founders who are involved, so please give them some love. They're very busy individuals and they're taking up to 2 hours out of their day to come and sit and chat with me about themselves, about their businesses, and about all other kinds of stuff. Look in the description on whatever platform you're watching this and you will find links to them for their LinkedIn profiles and also the projects and the startups they're working on. So do go and check those out. And while you're at it, maybe give me a bit of love too. I do this as something on the side to my main business. I run a company called ThinkWork. And so if you're looking for any advice, I also do free commercial advice for those for up to 1 hour. That job allows me to do this. Thank you so much. Enjoy the episode. Please do show love and appreciation for them, and of course for this episode. If you enjoy it, like it, subscribe, share. Without further ado, I've talked long enough. Enjoy the episode. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Founders Unplugged, hosted by Greg McCallum.
Hello, Jeremy.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can indeed. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you? Oops.
Yeah, very well, thanks. Well, you know what, actually, so I'm going to address the elephant in the room before we get going. You may notice it looks like I've been a couple of rounds with Mike Tyson here. So I'm going to address it because obviously it's going to be a video podcast. So, yeah, the weirdest thing happened. I got stung by a mosquito just here on the side of my temple. And it swelled up, and it's much better than it was. I've literally been off work the last 2 days because it was out here like that. So yeah, but I've been all right apart from that.
Oh no, it's a nightmare, isn't it?
Weirdest thing. I've never been sort of stung near the face before. I didn't think they went that, but yeah, maybe the neck or something like that. But I was thinking, like, why on earth would they go for the face? Like, they don't really like that area. And then I realized the night before I'd been out in the garden on the phone, like that, and I was thinking maybe the light was attracting them.
Maybe. Oh my god.
There you go.
It's bad.
Lesson learned. Don't go on the phone at night time. It's dangerous.
Or do it inside.
Yeah.
What's this? The Lord Twat. There we go. I'm loving the mug. I really can't compete with my plain yellow mug out of.
Oh well, you can't beat a good yellow mug though, can you? So, but anyway, enough about me. Yeah, tell me what's been going on with you.
Yes, first of all, is the sound and the quality and all that all right here?
Oh yeah,
so excellent. Yeah. I'm in platform 9 in Hove, so
really? Okay.
I have my cleaner at home. Didn't think that hoovering in the background would be a good idea today.
Right,
so
okay. Yeah, fair enough.
Pop in here. You said you're videoing as well. Is this?
Yeah, we've started already. Yeah.
That's fine. So I've not got the most inspiring.
We just get straight into it.
Oh no, I've not got the most inspiring background or anything like that.
I think it looks good. I think I was going to ask you where you were actually because I can see some foliage behind you.
I'll tell you what. Let me just move up a little bit. Let's move things around. At some point, somebody may have to come into the other bit of this. There you go. That looks a bit better. We've got a bit more greenery.
It looks like you're in a greenhouse or something.
Something like that's all good. Do you know what? I'm good. We've had a good few weeks. We launched a brand new tech group in Manchester last week, which was kind of super exciting. I say brand new. It was a group that somebody else had run up until COVID. Right. And during COVID, that company got sold. So I went to the guys that got sold because I know them and I said, can we just take it over? Like, can we do that? And, eventually after a bit of toing and froing, I was like, yeah. So we launched it last week. It was brilliant. It was great to see people in the room. People were coming over to us and saying, oh yeah, I've been waiting 4 years for someone to build this up again.
No, brilliant.
And I came 4 years ago. Or people haven't seen for longer than 4 years. I used to see at meetups in London. So
these are in-person meetups tonight.
Yeah. Because we run them in Brighton, but doing it in Manchester, it was knackering. Knackering but fulfilling. Get off the train, run around Manchester. Oh God, we've forgotten soft drinks because it's always free beer and stuff like that. We haven't got any soft drinks, and we need to. No, the hotel's not that near the venue, and there was a lot of running around, but it was very, very fulfilling.
That's good. And like, what sort of attendees are there? Sort of developers, or is it a broad range within the tech industry? Sort of, what's the focus?
We had a really good mix. So the idea of this, the events that we run, I want to try and keep them open to people that are university students all the way up to like the CEOs and the people that are,
Cool.
the big cheeses. So we try and have a good range of talks. So there will be, obviously, there's networking opportunities, which is great for the student to meet the CEO kind of thing.
Yeah.
And one of the things I did, I ran the door for the event last week. So as people were coming in and signing in, like, who are you? Who do you want to meet tonight? So that I could try and, oh yeah, you need to talk to you, this person over here, have a chat. So we had a really good mix come through the door. We had quite a few students. We had some senior developers. We had some people in academia. We had small business owners, freelancers. It was a good mix of people, which
that sounds good.
Which is what you want, really.
I really like the idea of you sort of almost playing Cupid in a way at that in that level, because I think more networking events needs people like that, because if people are inherently quite shy, and the only time that they're really going to come out their shell and try and speak to someone is if they want to get something from someone, so it's quite nice to have someone playing that role and sort of matchmaking a little bit. I think it breaks the ice, being a proper host. Really, I think that's good. That's great. I'm glad that's gone well. That sounds like a really great idea. Which one do you run in Brighton?
So we run Brighton R, which was last night actually.
Right.
Off the back of the pub from that one, Brighton R and Brighton Pi. So it's for the R users and Python users in Brighton.
Okay.
And Brighton Pi's in a few weeks. So these are, again, they're quite technical events, but they're bringing together people that code in that language. And last night we had students again at Brighton R, and we had people that were freelancers, and we had middle managers. We had, again, a really nice mix of people.
Even within that quite specific demographic you have. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. And it just brings people together. And I had a conversation with somebody at Brighton R last night, and he was telling me about one of his challenges. And then somebody was telling me about how they've been solving the same challenge. I said, oh, you guys need to have a chat then. And it's that community of tech developers. Everyone's within tech now. Everyone's probably had the problem that you've got before. It's great. When I started learning to code, and I would Google, how do I build a vector or something really simple? No one had had that problem because it was 2005. Stack Overflow and places like that now are just brilliant. You can Google it. Someone's had the problem before, and because it's an open source language, they've probably got the code on there that you need. So as long as you know what the problem is, which is, I think, sometimes the hard bit, it's like, what is the actual problem here? As long as you know what that is, you can get the answer. But networking is another really good way of doing that as well.
That's really interesting that Brighton's got to the point of like having that level of like networking events, like you said, like Brighton versus Manchester, from what your friend's perspective was, that we're able to even have events on specific languages. I didn't realize that there was that many sort of that bigger community there, I guess. But yeah, I guess it is. And for context, for anyone listening or watching, I live in Eastbourne, which is just down the road from Brighton, and you live in Brighton, don't you?
Yeah.
So yeah, we're very nearby. We met actually in as a result of the Silicon Brighton Slack group, didn't we? So that's how we came across each other. Yeah. Well, look, we haven't introduced you yet. So why don't we, Jeremy, you give yourself an introduction and say who you are and what you do, and then I know we're kind of doing it a bit backwards, but now is better late than never, I suppose. So yeah, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, 10 minutes in, let's introduce myself. I mean, a little bit about...
It happens quite a lot.
No, a little bit about what I do anyway. But yeah, so I'm Jeremy Horne. I'm the founder and director of Datacove, and we are Brighton-based, as we've just discovered, data and analytics consultancy. Now, there's probably people listening that are thinking, what the flip is a data and analytics consultancy, right? So let's put it this way. Oh, here we go. There's plenty of things that you can read about us. But yeah, what is a data and analytics consultancy? Nowadays, everybody's got data. And there's probably people listening thinking, oh, I don't have any data. So I'll ask you this. Do you have a website? Because if you have a website, there are going to be people visiting that website. And those people have data. You know who they are. You know where they're visiting from. You know quite a bit about them. You might not be tracking that data. So you might not be tracking that data through Google Analytics or your favorite analytics tool. But there is data there. And so we're here to help people understand and grow their businesses through data. So in very simple terms, we can tell you who your customers are and what your best products are. And that's quite a big thing. You might think, oh yeah, but I know who my customer is. But when I challenge our clients quite early on and say, who's your customer? What's your best product? Quite a lot of them say, you know what? I've been in business for 20 years and I actually don't know the answer to that. So we'll analyze your customer data. We will tell you who's your customer. You know, are they a 20-year-old, a 30-year-old, or are they a 40-year-old? Are they from Brighton, Bristol, or Birmingham? Do they like the environment? Do they like fast, sporty cars that drive around F1 circuits? So we'll really get to the heart of who the customer is. We can also help you with marketing as well. So from a marketing perspective, it's, I've got a marketing budget. Where should I spend it? Do I go out and put a big Facebook campaign out, or should I stick a billboard at Brighton and Eastbourne train stations so that everybody can see it when they come off the train? What's going to work? What's not going to work? Where should we put the money? And how much should we invest? You know, if I've got 10 grand to invest, but I only need to invest 5, why am I going to invest 10? So trying to help people put the money in the right place. And then most importantly, process automation as well. Every business, everybody that is listening to this, in your business, you will have that painful process. Something that takes you 20 hours a week to do. Might not take you 20 hours, but it takes someone in the business 20 hours. We can write a set of code that gets rid of that 20 hours forever. And I think probably those are probably kind of the main things that we do. We do a lot of training and coaching, so teaching people R, Python, or just teaching people how to be more confident and how to love data. So we do a lot of, I suppose, data energy training is a good way to put it, but getting people to really embrace the importance of data within their organizations. We're going to be training people. So we do initiatives where we train people in the NHS. So we help the NHS community. This is giving away our time for free 3 or 4 times a year, just for a day, to help analysts in the NHS understand how to code better. And that's our way of giving back to, one of probably the biggest and the most strained yet respected organisations in the UK.
Yeah,
that's us in a nutshell.
That's a very admirable thing to do. It's interesting because of, data is something of a dirty word in a lot of startups. There's a lot of trying to sort of make do with what you've got at the early stages, but then having worked in sales and marketing for as long as I have, I've always talked about being very data led, right? And I understand the importance of it, and most of us do. But I think there's a lot of us out there that say that, but don't really fully understand the importance of that and how to implement it. What would you say are sort of like some of the fundamentally misunderstood aspects of actually utilizing and leveraging data, like you were saying about sort of, to really understand the profile or whatever it might be? Like, do you have any sort of typically very well misunderstood things, especially from people who claim that they already understand it, perhaps?
I think probably the first thing is everybody thinks it's complex and it's too hard and it's something that we can't do and it's all maths and stats and numbers, and so I'm just not going to do it because it's too hard. And actually, data is not about maths, it's not about stats, it's not about spreadsheets, it's not about any of that complicated stuff. It's about solving a challenge or solving a business problem. So a lot of people, when I go in to talk to them for the first time, they open up a massive spreadsheet and say, here's the data, what can you do with it? And it is totally the wrong approach. And I say, well, imagine there's 2 ways you can go down here, and I use the harsh method. There's a nicer way of putting it. Imagine you've just walked into your board meeting at work, and the CEO is standing there and he's holding a gun to your head, right? What is it that he wants to know? What would he pull the trigger for if you don't know? Or he or she, I should say as well, obviously. Let's try and be correct here. And it gets people to really articulate what the challenge is at the heart of that business. Now, you can do it the other way and say the CEO's there holding a magic wand and he waves it and you're going to tell him what. And it gets people to articulate the challenge. And I'll give an example. I was talking to a law firm client and I said, what is it? I know that you want to know who your customer is, but what is it you don't know? Because with data, I think you've really got to explore the challenge and the problem. They said, well, we just don't know who our customer is, but what don't you know? What don't you know about your customer? What, in an ideal world, what would you want to know? And they said, well, we're a law firm. We'd like to know how many people on our database are over the age of 60 and don't have a will. That's a really specific challenge. It's a really good challenge for a law firm, because you can go and market wills to people over the age of 60 that don't have one. The likelihood is these people need one and want one, but just don't know they need it. So, you can then go into the customer database. You can have a look at, okay, they might not have a will with you. Maybe they got it with somebody else, but there's a really good marketing opportunity in there. But it's such a simple problem. They didn't tell me about numbers, about spreadsheets, about blocks. So it's about thinking about it in the simplest possible form. Don't overcomplicate it. The complicated stuff is done by an analyst. We do that complicated stuff. So you give us a challenge, we give you a solution. The bit in the middle, you're never going to see it. You're never going to see blocks, code, mathematics, statistics. You give us a challenge and we'll tell you in very simple terms what the answer to that is.
Yeah, so it's more the case of what is it you're looking to achieve, essentially, as opposed to no, that makes sense. With something like that, then how would you go about addressing that? So with that example of trying to segment the audience by age, and then and like you said, not having a will. How do you even begin to approach something like that? Is that from a combination of all touch points that a company has, and sort of putting that together, and how do you even go about that?
I mean, often it will depend on the type and the size of the organization you're dealing with. Sometimes it's very simple. If you're dealing with a small business or a startup, the likelihood is there's one database, or there's a couple of spreadsheets, or there's not a lot of things in a lot of places. And we work with bigger companies, and that's where the challenge comes in, because there's data that people don't even know about that exists.
Right.
It's like, oh, no, we don't have that. And then you talk to somebody else, yes, that person's got it. And working with a big company, I think the first 3 or 4 weeks, you're just talking to so many random people's the wrong word, but so many people that uncover things that even people in that organization don't know exist. So it's about collating everything that they've got, and then starting to look, okay, so what's the challenge? Let's take the one of the wills. So have we got a customer database? What do we know about the customers? Now, if you're a law firm, you'll definitely know the customer's name, their age, and things like that, because you always take a date of birth. So you'll know that bit of information. Then you've got to look at the product cycle. So, okay, what product data have we got? We might have a menu of products and services that we offer. So can we cross-reference all of our different product offerings with the wills offering and see where we've got an intersection? So all the people that are on both, that's fine. They've got a will. We don't need to worry about them. Maybe we want to talk to them about, is your will fit for purpose? So that's one segment. And then we've got a load of other people who are, they're in the age bracket. That's right. They're in the age bracket, but they don't have a will with us. So let's talk to them about, do you have one? Do you have it with somebody else? Can we help you update it? Maybe they've told us they already have a will with somebody else. So should we contact them and say, does your will need updating? You can make the messaging right. Don't say, oh yeah, you're over 60 now, time to update your will. But again, it all comes down to messaging, and that's something else we can talk about, because data isn't just numbers, it's text as well. So I'll talk a little bit later about how you use text to get that message right, and how you strike the right emotive tone within text analytics of data.
That's interesting.
But yeah, so then you've got that segment of people that are in the right age range but don't have a will with you. Then you might want another segment of people that are 55 and over, so they're 5 years away from that magic 60. We might have a different message for them. And then we might, again, for people that are younger, there's always benefit to people that are in their 20s and 30s that are just buying their first home. It's a really good time to get into people that need a will. So you can have another message for those people. But it's about creating those segments. Now, that's obviously a very simplistic example. It's just age-based segmentation. You might look at other things as well. So, again, going back to the homeowner example, who have we conveyanced for recently? So we conveyanced for somebody, they've just bought a property. Was it a first-time buyer? And again, you might hold that information somewhere. It's the kind of thing you ask. It's the kind of thing that you hold. So it's always thinking about, when you're collecting the data, what are you getting and how do you store that? Because again, going back to conveyancing, first time buyer or not is a really useful touch point as a law firm. The first time buyer, there's so much more you can offer them. And people's journey with a law firm is often one service related, and then you kind of go away and don't come back again. So always think about what else you can sell them. And even other law firms that we work with that are very specialized in their services, they think, well, they might not need us ever again. So what partnerships can we create with other companies that if we refer somebody on, we get a 10% referral bonus? So it's always thinking about that journey.
And you don't just work with law firms, so you work with a whole range of businesses, don't you?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I just thought I'd point that out. But yeah, what sort of things? Because like you said, and you alluded to there, there's a lot of scenarios where data is spread out, especially in larger organizations. I've seen it myself, consulting with bigger businesses. There's a lot of situations where things are very compartmentalized. People don't quite realize what they've got or what they're doing, and there's sort of miscommunication there, especially when it comes to data and whether it's being used or not, etc.
Yeah.
But what would you say is sort of some best practices to implement, maybe really early on in the journey of a business to start gathering data? Where, how to do it, where to keep it? Are there some operational tips you can give so that you're almost preparing yourself for a point in time where someone like you, your business would come in and have like the dream scenario where it's kind of ready to go?
Definitely. And I think the first step is create a data strategy. Now, I don't want people to go away and think, oh my God, this is a scary 100-page document with lots of massive diagrams and numbers that I don't understand. It's something that we can help do as well. When I say data strategy, it could be, depending on the size of your organization, you could do it on a sheet of paper, do it on a one-pager. So what you've got to think about is data is there to help you understand your business. So what is it that you need to understand about your business? If you go back to where everything starts, every business has got a product. Now that product might not be a physical product that you buy in a shop. That might be, you might sell training products. So you might sell training courses. That's your product. You might be a charity and your product is raising money so you can go and buy, I don't know, you can go and buy a wheelchair for somebody, but your product is raising money. So everyone's got a product. So if you start with product, what is it that you need to know to be able to really maximize your output from that product, what you're getting, your sales from that product? And that's where you can start to build a strategy. Okay, so this is what we need to know. And then make a list of the things that you need to ask people and collect. And it's really important you get this down early on. There's no point creating a web form. We can all go and do it right now. Let's just go and create a form in 5 minutes of name, address, email, all the things you want to get. But think about it, because particularly in the GDPR world now, people are a lot more reluctant to give away data unless they know why you're using it. So you can't ask, what's your birthday? Why do you need my birthday? So you could say something like, we'd like to give you a voucher for your next birthday. When's your birthday? Be really careful about the way you ask that question, because a lot of people will put, oh, my birthday's tomorrow, so I get a voucher. So I think the key thing is we want to give it to you on your next birthday next year. Just make that kind of super clear. Or we've seen it with companies a lot where, number of people that's birthdays, I think it's like 20-30% birthday is the day after the sign-up day. There's a lot of people that are cheeky like that. But think about what you want to collect. Make sure there is a reason for collecting it, and make sure you're going to use it. Because if somebody is giving you information, they will expect that to be used. So there's no point asking somebody, which of our products have you bought before? And that person says, I buy product A every 2 months. And then you send them an email 2 days later saying, have you ever used product A? Is that what I've told you this? So people want that personalized service. So think about how you're going to use it. Make that list. Make sure that form is really easy as well, because there is an exchange here. People are giving you information. They want it to be easy to sign up or they won't do it. So then once you've got that information, you've got a very simple and solid, this is the start of your database. Make sure that you're storing that. So this is going back to data strategy. You store that correctly. So how are you going to keep your data? How are you going to keep it secure? You can't really have it in a spreadsheet that just sits without a password. Even if your database is simplistic and it is a spreadsheet, password protect it. How are you going to update it? What is your policy for updating that data? Data becomes out of date the moment that you get it. How do you keep it up to date? How are you going to keep in contact with your customers? Are you at some point going to want to collect other data do you think? Do you think in the future you might want to know other things about your customer? And is it better to collect that now? Is it better to ask it now? Because you don't want to keep redesigning things and redesigning things. So it's really thinking about kind of that length of that journey as well. You want to be able to get everything that you can with one ask, because it's so hard to get things out of people. Do you need to create some kind of exchange for it? Is it, if you give us some data, we'll send you a free sample, or if you give us some data, we'll give you 10% off. One of our clients, they do like a competition. If you give, well, we'll give you a £500 voucher or something. Well, not everybody, but we'll enter into a draw at the end of each month for a £500 voucher to spend with our brand. So what can you give people to make them really happy to give that data to you? Could you also supplement it with regular surveys to keep it up to date? Again, maybe not incentivized as well.
And so it's interesting because as you know, I work with a lot of SaaS companies, right? And along the journey there's usually quite a lot of touch points, or at least there should be in my view. A lot of touch points. So like you said, surveys, especially in the early stages where there's a lot of feedback asks on the product, and the ability sometimes to vote for new products, and all this kind of stuff. Especially the more community-led SaaS products, that's quite good. There's a lot of those touch points almost built in. And you even see, I see quite regularly from a lot of the platforms I use, things like just a straight up ask to say, are your records up to date? I suppose you could even be as direct as that, But what about sort of behavioral related data? So in terms of the way that the customers interact with a platform, especially I'm thinking sort of along that same lines of SaaS, is that at all useful? Like, how can that be leveraged in kind of what you do? I'm thinking there are a lot of platforms out there, Hotjar and things like that sort of measure those behaviors. Do you work with that sort of data as well? And if you do, sort of, can you give us maybe an example or two on how that can be leveraged?
Yeah, I think with data, it's not. So obviously I've focused on the customer side of things there. Usage is really important, depending on the model that you're building. So I'll give an example. We were looking at, working with a bank, and one of the things they wanted to understand was, what is the appetite for a customer to take up another product with us, right? If you're a bank, you have savings accounts, you have investment products, you have current accounts, you might have mortgages, you might do business banking, personal banking. There's so many options. So if somebody's got a current account, there's so many other things that you can potentially sell to them. And behavioral data is really important. So there's the simple behavioral data, which is transactional. So in the sense of a bank, transactional is taking money in, taking money out of your account, putting money in, and how often are you engaging. But there's also metrics like, if you've got an online banking platform, when are you logging in? How often are you logging in? What do you do when you log in? And that we found was a really big predictor on people's likelihood to take up another product. If you're engaged with one bank or one particular brand, the likelihood of them taking up, so if you've got a current account, taking up a savings account next was a heck of a lot higher. And so we created these cohorts of customers where we said, okay, these are the people you want to target first for savings, to move from current account to savings account to other accounts. And these are the people you probably want to target a bit later. But that behavioral side of things is really important, because if somebody is engaged, it's much easier to then send them the right messaging to say, this is probably something that's right for you right now. Why don't you think about taking this on? So behavioral is really important. In fact, when you're building all the predictive models that we build, we don't just say, yeah, this is the answer. We say, this is the answer, and here are the 5 or 10 most important things that have driven us to that answer. And in that particular model, so the number of times they'd engage with the online banking platform in the last 30 days was really predictive, but also just their transactional behavior from, say, the last 3 months was far more important than what they did 12 months ago. So it's that recency of behavior. And, things like age and gender and location were also quite predictive, because, if you've got a really big presence as a brand in a certain location, if you're a brand that's all around Brighton, people in Brighton will be a lot more engaged with you than people in Birmingham, even if you've got a customer in Birmingham. So really simple things like engagement, again, very basic demographics, but behavior, which is really important. And I think people almost don't emphasize it enough. So how are you going to store that? Behavior is transactional. How are you storing your transactional data?
Yeah.
If I say to you, I want to know, and I hate going into transactional databases because they can be huge, there's so many, every different transaction. But if I want to look at how somebody has purchased over the past 5 years, how would I get that from you? Because we would then want to overlay that with the demographics, and then have you run any surveys? I want to overlay that as well. Everything that you've got, no matter how basic you think it is, because models nowadays are really, if something's not useful, the model will ignore it.
And like you said, overlaying it, right? Building a picture, actually combining this data all together is where it's ultimately really valuable, right?
Yeah.
So it may not seem like it holds value on its own, but all together. What I found really interesting, like when we spoke before and when we're speaking again now, is just how comprehensive your service is. Like you're saying about helping with developing a data strategy, and also even going as far as helping with how to create messaging around the data so it's more specific and relevant to that. That's a really comprehensive offering. Like it's really valuable what you're offering to a business, and of course the execution in between. Like that's really interesting. I mean, because a lot of you're sort of tackling the problem end to end, in my view, which is not only identifying how to collect this data, how to maintain this data, but then how to act on it in a way that is very relevant and more than likely going to produce the best results through things like messaging and things like that. Like, was this something that you had in mind when you first started Datacove, or did this kind of evolve just out of you naturally finding out that actually there's a need for these things? Or maybe it was a bit of both?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And throughout my whole career, so for the 18 or so years, maybe slightly less, let's not dwell on numbers, but through the X number of years, so let's go with data, mathematical variables, through the X number of years that I worked before starting my business, this is kind of what I've done. So it's consulting, but initially in the city, then I did it for a few marketing agencies, and it was really helping people make sense of their data. And what I come to realize over 15 years of doing it was that a lot of people make it more complex than it is. So we need to be here to make the complex simple. So when I started it, it was about, okay, how can we make everything simple for people to understand their data? How can we take that pain away from businesses? And so I kind of put together offerings based on what I thought people needed. So again, based on what I've worked on in the past, I kind of know what people need. I don't think everybody in businesses know exactly what they need. Sometimes you start to talk to them and the briefs evolve quite quickly, and it's like, well, we want a customer segmentation model, and it's like, that's quite a specific thing to want. So let's go right back to the beginning. Who's your customer? And you start to ask them questions, and you get that brief to evolve. So I think people don't always know what they want, so we're here to help them define what it is they want, and build an offering that they're going to need, they're going to use, but is going to make their life simpler as well. And then also, it's about how you then present back the results of that. So I was talking to somebody last night, and if you're going to, we're doing quite technical stuff. If I walked into a client and said, oh yes, I built your model and it's got an 86% R squared and there's a mean square error of 30, and I've got a support vector machine model with 48 support vectors on it, your marketing manager doesn't care, right? Do they? They want to know, but I've got 50 grand. Am I doing a Facebook campaign, or am I doing some paid search, or am I doing a bit of both? So it's about going in with actionable insight, things that they can then take away and say, okay, I'm going to put my 30 grand on Facebook and 20 grand on paid search, and they'll supplement each other, and that will work quite well. So I think the offering that we build is things that we know people need that they might not necessarily know they need, but everybody knows they need something with data. So that exploratory conversation, we're quite happy to spend an hour or two with people initially, just chatting. It's not paid time or anything like that. We want to get the brief right with a potential client. So we'll spend some time, we'll knock that brief around with you so that we can get it watertight and work out exactly what it is that you want. Because if you come in and say, I want a customer segmentation model, that might cost you a lot of money. If it's just, I want to know, going back to the very specific example of, I want to know who on our database is over 60 and needs a will, that's not as such the customer segmentation piece at first. That's a bit of simple analysis. So let's give you exactly what it is you need, and let's work out what it is you need first before we start getting into deep briefs and anything like that.
And then I suppose as you're maybe working to, if it is a clearly defined brief like that initially, as you're going in there and assessing the situation, you may actually come across some discoveries that you could maybe come to some suggestions with and say, well, we've actually found that you have a lot more data than you realize, or you have a lot more data in an area that you didn't appreciate. We've noticed some opportunities here. Do you often do that as well, and actually come and present some ideas based on that?
Yeah, sometimes you'll find things that you're not expecting and that the client's not expecting. One of the things I always say to people at the start is, don't tell me what you think the answer is, because I don't want that in the back of my head.
Because it almost bias the results to some degree.
Exactly. You'll go looking for it, and if you find it, great, I've got what they want. So we'll try and tell people what we think. And it was like earlier on this week, we were looking at things like calculating cost per leads from a specific campaign, and we said, oh, it was £10, but you managed to reduce it to £5. And it's like, oh, they'll be really happy with that because they thought it was about £9. So it was about £9, and they've reduced it with some really good media activity. So again, if I'd have known that beforehand, I'd have been looking for the 9. So I think that's really important. Is we will uncover things that people don't know. But it's also really vital that when we're presenting those findings back, that people are brave. Because if we say to you, look, actually, your customer's a 50-year-old in Birmingham and they thought it was a 40-year-old in Brighton, you've got to be brave enough to believe the data and go and say, we're going to go and talk to 50-year-olds in Birmingham now. We didn't do that before. Now, organizations are very different at that. One of the things you will need in an organization to make data work is a data champion. You'll need somebody that really believes in the value of data. It just needs to be one person. It doesn't even need to be a chief data officer. It could be a marketer. It could be, going back to, I think one of the law firms we talked to, it's actually a lawyer who really believes in data and the value of it. So you need a champion, somebody that can see the value in data and that can encourage everybody in the organization to use that. And if you've got that champion, people will be brave. They'll do things that are different. They'll do things that the results are telling them. And ultimately, the business will benefit.
Yeah, they can be your bridge to the rest of the business, as it were. Yeah. So tell me, because you were saying 18 years doing this sort of work, but Datacove is relatively new, though, isn't it, as a business? So what sort of sparked you wanting to? Because obviously this is Founders Unplugged, right? So you're a founder.
Yes. We've got 40 minutes in, and not really got there, but
yeah. So what really drove you to start Datacove? I mean, I have a feeling it's maybe a lot of the different things you were talking about there, but up to that point, had you run your own business before at any point up to your current business, or is it your first time? Or
first time, and it was something I'd always wanted to do. Going back 5, 6, 7+ years, I think having got my background in the city and moved into marketing agencies, I'd always thought one day, at some point, I want to do this, but in order to start, you don't just wake up one morning and like, right, I'm going to start a business now, let's go for it. A lot of things need to fall into place. And, I had a chat with somebody and I kind of gave them like the 5 things that I think you need to fall into place to start your own business. So I'll just touch on a few of them and why they fell into place for me. I think the first thing is, in order to make a business successful, you need to know where the money's coming from. So you can't just sort of wake up and start a business like, right, who's the client? Where am I going to get my first paycheck from? And at the point before I was starting it, I had an ex-client get in touch and say that we need some support. We need some of this done. Do you know anybody? At the same time as somebody I know saying that, I know you want to start a business and I've got these guys that could be like the perfect fit for you to work with as a first client for a little bit. So I kind of knew that, okay, there's a couple of clients that we can work with. So we've got somewhere where we can see some money coming in while the business is built up. Now, the next thing you need is you can't start a business when you have zero, like no money, no finance, nothing. I started my business in the middle of COVID. Great time to start a business, right? You know, everything around the world is beginning to crumble in a certain way. But just before lockdown, we'd sold a buy-to-let property that we used to have, and we were about to buy. This buy-to-let was quite far away, and it was harder to manage. We were about to buy one locally instead. So got all this money in the bank, and then lockdown hits. You can't go and view properties, and so I'm working at home with a decent amount of money sitting in the bank, and I thought, I'm going to start a business. Like, now's the time to do it. You know, I'm a numbers person. I cooked the numbers and said I could earn absolutely zero for the next 12 months and be fine. Now, that was never the plan, but the money's in the bank. I've got the financial safety to go and do this. I know where the first few clients are coming from. But the other thing that I think is really important is knowing where your network is as well. So it's not about the first two clients, it's about the next two and the next two after that. You can't come out of university and start a business. Not very, you can, but it's not easy. So if you've got a good network around you, and this is what I've been doing throughout my whole career, building up my network, keep in touch with ex-clients, colleagues, there is no bad connection in business. So even if you meet someone at an event, I can't work with you. You might not be able to work with me now, but you might know somebody that can. So everybody's a good connection. Build up that black book, which I've been doing over the years, so that you knew where your people were going to come from. Get out there and network, talk. I think particularly within the tech industry as well, there's things that, again, I've done with our YouTube page and GitHub page. Show people what you're about. Show people your code. Show people what you know, because that way people trust you as a tech professional as well. So it's all of these things that I worked on doing over that time, and lockdown was quite good for me because, you know, more time at home, not going anywhere, so I can build these things up and start to work out from the ground what it is that I really wanted. So good timing for me, and I think particularly at that time, a lot of people have reevaluated where they were going, and this being something I really wanted to do, knowing it was the right time, it was kind of if I didn't do it then, I probably would never do it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of founders that have been on this this podcast so far took the plunge during COVID, and I know plenty more as well. Like you said, it was a bit of a perfect storm, and of course for many as well, layoffs were a big push for that. It was just like, well, I'm out of a job, a new one isn't on the horizon right now because no one's hiring. It's like kind of now or never, you know, sort of almost painted into a corner. But it sounds like you had a similar perfect storm, but from your own volition. It's interesting you mentioned that you had some people giving you some advice around it as well. So my takeaway from that was almost that maybe another good thing to do, if you're able to, if it's not going to maybe put your current job at jeopardy, is actually let people know that you have a plan to maybe one day. Because it sounds to me, if you hadn't have done that, you maybe wouldn't have found out about some potential clients. You wouldn't have found out about or even been given any advice or anything like that. But just by almost putting it out into the universe, you're kind of getting something back from that as to whether or not it's a good idea. You know, almost stress testing it, right? So that may be even a good thing, you know, to do, and, you know, just say to people, look, I'm thinking of doing this thing. What do you think? You know, you know, do you know anyone? But yeah, it's a really interesting point you make about. I mean, it's part of the same story, isn't it? Which is the networking thing. Really, it's just it's not what you know, it's who you know. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm a big believer in that. That no matter who, you know, just meet new people. Like there's no bad connection. Like, there's nothing. People can come up with great ideas. You know, a little comment, a little whatever. Even if it's just to say, I believe in you. I reckon you can do this. You know, that sometimes can be enough. That sometimes can be all you need, or the opposite, which is just like, you know, I don't think it's not a great idea. Maybe you need to work on it a little bit more, or something. You know, whatever it is, I think speak to as many people as you can, because you never know. Like, you know, there's always someone that goes, do you know what? I might know someone who might be interested in that. You know what I mean? You never know. You never know.
Exactly. And all the business we get, it's all recommendation, word of mouth. I say, well, I mean, pretty much all. So it's all ex-clients I've worked with, ex-people I've worked with that say, you need to talk to this person. And now we're doing a lot more networking. We're part of a few groups in Brighton. We've obviously got some things up in Manchester. So we go out there, we talk to people, and now we're starting to get clients that come in through that network. So people that we meet at a networking event, and again, you know, people that you might not necessarily think are very good connections. So we've got one guy who runs one of the local business shows, and, you know, we're going to be exhibiting at that show in September. And he put us in contact with somebody that needs data support. So you think, okay, good guy to know, because we're in effect giving him money to be at his show.
Yeah.
But actually, that full cycle's come back, and we've got a client out of it. So
and that's before even attending the event.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, I see it at networking events, like you meet somebody and it's like, oh, hi, I'm an IT manager. It's like, I don't need IT, I'm off. Talk to them, because networking, it's not about selling your business. Don't go in and flash your business card to everybody. Go in and make friends with people. What do they like doing? I met somebody who I think is a brilliant networker a while ago, and so I think the first thing someone said to them is, what's your business? And she said, doesn't matter what my business is. What do you like to do at the weekend? Like, what?
Yeah.
Get to know people, become friendly with them, make your network about friendships rather than business, and then the business comes from it.
Yeah, and it's a lot more rewarding. Let's be honest. I mean, working in at least for myself, and I know for a lot of us, in the way that we do, sat in front of a computer screen day in, day out, it can be quite a lonely road, right? It's nice to meet other people. It's nice to have meaningful connections and have people that can share the experience. Like for me, that's when I go to networking events and do things like this. Like first and foremost, it's like I want to understand the person. I love people. I want to understand what makes people tick. I want to know what gets them out of bed in the morning. That's interesting. And if you put that at the forefront of what you do, like you said, you're right, that the rest kind of just falls into place. And nothing reeks of desperation more than someone going around trying to sell. Like that's usually the person that gets ostracized very quickly in networking events, I found. Unless you go to a sales networking event, in which case, well, everyone's the same. So,
but
I've been to those too.
I think it's time for a really good story about a networking event we went to. Now, I'm obviously not going to name the person, but this was an event we went to within the past 6 months. Right. And it's one of these really nice, friendly groups. You get to know everybody. And some guy, never seen before, and in fact, never seen again, walked into the event, and he walked in with his business cards. And he just literally went around everyone, you want this, you want this, you want this. He just gave everybody a card. And I thought, didn't even talk to us, didn't tell us what he did, didn't tell us who he was. Just, here's my card, here's my card, here's my card. And he probably walked out about half an hour later. Really odd behavior. And I thought,
very odd, yeah.
I don't know who this guy is, but I don't want to do business with them. So on the way out, I put the card into the bin. Poor guy. But anyway, then the next morning, my colleague messaged me and said, that guy that was giving out his cards, have you looked him up on LinkedIn? Have you added him? I said, no, I threw the card in the bin. He said, oh, well, I've just looked him up. It wasn't even his card. He was going to come and giving out his colleague's card. So obviously his colleague may have got a load of spam mail the next morning when he's added to everybody's database. But it's just, that's quite ballsy. Go out. Maybe he hated his colleague. I don't know. Maybe he wanted to sign him up for spam lists. But it was just bizarre.
Very bizarre. Yeah, it's interesting. Like it's actually so I've done a lot of events. I'm sure just like you have, like exhibits and things like that for various different companies I've worked for and with and so on. And there's this kind of well, I'll put it this way. So like you were saying about going to this event, you've got a stall there and so on. We used to do that, for a lot of these different businesses. We spent thousands of pounds on these stalls. Actually, some of the best, most fruitful events I've had, especially when leading sales teams, have been just to attend these events rather than have exhibits there, because it enables you to just walk around and meet people. And in fact, and it gets you into a certain mind frame too, which is, if we're sat at this thing, okay, we've got to stand there, we've got to talk about the business, that's the big banner behind us. When people come, we've got to give them a flyer, we've got to try and pull people away from what they're doing to come to see us. So we've got to be in sales mode. And that is just so unappealing. Like you literally see people trying to avoid you like the plague when they walk past you, right? Just like you walk past people in the street with giving out flyers, you tend to be like, no, thank you, right? But yeah, the complete opposite. When you're just mingling and walking around with people, you're in a different mind frame. You're just in the mind frame of, hey, I want to start a conversation. It's really not rocket science. It's really, what I mean? There's nothing overly complex about it. From the difference between just having a meaningful conversation, a connection with someone. How are you? How's your day? How are you enjoying the show? Why are you here? Ask more first. I mean, that's basically the key, isn't it? It's like the art of conversation 101. Ask questions, find out about people. It's not difficult.
And it's so important in data because you need to find out exactly what the challenge is. So being
Right.
inquisitive, we hire people that are inquisitive. You need that nature.
Yeah.
Now, when I walked around a show a few weeks ago, and a lot of the people there I knew. There's always this joke around, all the people that work for me, and they say, "Oh, you're like a local celebrity. Everyone knows you," and it's just like I'm totally not. But anyway, and even one of them who was walking around the show, I think, whinged somebody, "I can't walk around with him. We stop every 2 seconds," and but it's enhancing those relationships that you've already got, and I'm quite happy to go up to the stalls and build relationships. Most of them will start to talk to you like, "Who are you? What's your business all about?" And that, when we're going to run our stall at the business show in September, when people come up to us, I want to know as much about them as possible. I want them to do the talking. Tell me about them, because I can only help you if I know who you are and I know what your business is. Another great story here, and again, not somebody that will be named, but at this business show a few weeks ago, and indeed I've seen this person at many business shows before, and it's not just my experience. Quite a few people have said, "I've had this really odd experience." Go up to a stall and you find out who they are, and you start to tell them who you are, because I think there's a good knowledge and value exchange there. As a business, you want to know who you're talking to. And the person that runs this particular business and stall says, "No, you can't tell me about your business. I've paid for my stand here. This is about me. I don't want to know about your business." The person that's running the show will kick you out if he hears you talk, or he or she hears you talking about your business to people that are running stands. Really, really odd behavior, because
Very bizarre.
if you're trying to sell to somebody, you need to know what it is you're selling to them. But again, quite a few people that I've spoken to have had this same experience with this same business. I find it a really odd way of doing it. I want to know about you, because from a data perspective, I want to know what your challenge is. And in some cases, the challenge might be so simple that I'm quite happy to tell you what you can go away and do for free, bit of advice, because you can do it yourself. We always say to people, here are the bits you can do yourself for nothing. Here are the bits that we can do for you, because there's some bits, even as an analyst, you don't want to sit there cleaning up data. And some of our clients, "Oh yeah, but I want you to clean it up." And say, "Yeah, but do you realize that's 10 days of work and it's going to cost you quite a few £1,000s?" It's like, "Yeah, but just do it." Whereas others will say, "Okay, fine, I'll do that," and then you work with clean data. I'd much rather we get the clean data from the start. Maybe the project's a bit shorter, but we're working with data that everyone's comfortable with.
Yeah, cool. And ultimately what we're talking about here as well in relation, to this topic of, how to communicate with people and connect with people. It's essentially sales 101, really.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it is. It's just good sales practice and a good way of doing business, I think. It's but no, that's it. But it's a really interesting story. So to go back to what sparked you starting the business, a bit of a leap of faith, but a well calculated risk by the sound of it. You don't strike me as an individual that would make an uncalculated risk. You got all the data and you assessed the situation and made that risk. And how has it gone? I mean, you're here a couple of years after the fact, and by the sounds of it, it's doing well. And when we spoke before, you told me you're very busy. So, but maybe tell me a bit more about that. How have things been along that journey the last couple of years?
Yeah, so we'll go through the journey a little bit. So obviously we started in COVID. I call the official birthday actually the 5th of November 2020, because that's the day that I took the plunge and registered at Company's House. But it was a business before then that was, initially just a sole trader, and then I thought, no, I'm going to make something of this. Let's get it registered. So we always remember the 5th of November in our business and household. So yeah, we started with a couple of clients that, as I say, kept us busy for long enough. I say us, it was me then. It's a very lonely time as well, that you're starting up as a business. You don't have a team around you anymore. But as I said, Brighton's got this really great data community, which was really helpful to me. We've got Slack channels, we have meetups. And one of my friends was still on furlough for a long time, looking for a new job. And during COVID, we created this kind of data walks Slack group. So, all you could do to meet up with people during COVID was go for a walk. So it's like, well, why don't we create a Slack channel I want a walk, and then people pair up and have a walk. So that was quite useful to me in the first 6 months when I was on my own. Can somebody come for a walk with me? And often my friend would come for a walk or walk his dogs or something like that. And it was just useful if you had a challenge or a problem, when you go out and you just rant about your problem and you tell yourself the solution without anyone else telling you what to do. So that was quite good for the first 6 months. And then I realized that as we were taking on more and more clients and contracts, that I needed support. So 6 months in, took on our first hire, and that's when it became a bit more real. I learned more things about business. I had to learn about pensions, and I had to learn about payroll, and I had to learn about insurance and all sorts of things that when it's just you and you just kind of don't care is probably the wrong word. So I learned a few more things that I probably didn't want to know too much about, but now know a lot about. Took on our first person, and then I think we upgraded that to have a part-time support as well as one full-time, one part-time a few months later. So we got to the end of year one with 3 of us in the business. We had a portfolio of probably 4 or 5 clients that we were working on, some on like a retainer basis. So we do a set thing every month, and some that were, here's a project and there'll be another project in a few months. So again, different ways of working. And quite often, quite a lot going on. One of the big things that we've always wanted to do more is kind of sell more training courses and up our training programs, but it's the kind of thing that you only try and market when you've got time to deliver them. So we don't never really done a lot of that, and we're trying to look at ways we can do that. So yeah, got to the end of year one, 3 people strong, bringing in lots of enjoyable bits of diverse business, diverse industries. And then at the kind of halfway through, probably just before halfway through the second year, midway through it, we got a couple of other briefs come in, quite exciting, big projects. They needed, like the 2 people that I had working were quite junior. They were, fresh-ish grads. So I needed somebody, the more clients we get, I needed somebody that could sort of help lead on some projects. So it wasn't just me. So, we, rather than taking on a data analyst, we took on data scientists. So somebody that's got a little bit more, not just experience, but they've almost got more weapons in their armory because they can build models, but also somebody that's, with data scientists, a lot of people like to sit in the corner and get their work done. This was somebody that's happy to go out and talk to people and grow the business as well. So that brought us up to a team of 4. And then again, another kind of big client project came on towards the end of the second year. So we grew that team to 5 people. 5 people with some changes. One's left, one's come and been replaced and that kind of stuff. So 5 people, about 8 clients. We're pushing on the boundary of getting a few new big clients in at the moment as well. So, we're probably going to be up to about 10 plus very soon. Again, all on varying kind of, some are bigger, some are smaller, some are retainer, some are project. But again, continuing to grow that. And I think the biggest and most important thing about success and growing that is incentivizing the team. As the business grows, we're 5 people now. In order to make sure there's enough to keep 5 people busy, I can't do it on my own. So I incentivize everybody else. If you go in and bring in a client, you get, a proportion of that sale. If you upsell something to an existing client, you get a proportion of that, because it makes everybody think, when you're coming to an end of a bit of work, well, what's next with these people? Because it's like that age-old thing with customers. It's much easier to engage a current customer than it is to go and get a new one. So what can we do next with this lot?
Yeah, that's interesting. And you mentioned about you'd probably be ending this year, you reckon, on about sort of 10 as a team?
Yeah, hopefully more. Our years are in November, and we're looking at pushing on the boundaries of 10 by now. So I'd hope that we can push it up a little bit further by November. I don't sort of put together like hard and fast numbers, as long as we're bringing in the revenue that we need. I'm not one of those people that's going to say we need to have 15 clients and we need to be making 500 grand or anything like that. It's more about kind of having a business that's profitable, a team of happy people. I think people are really important. You've got to have the right team around it. And when we bought and when we brought on sort of number 4 and number 5 in terms of people, it becomes more real. Then when it's 3 of us, it's kind of, okay, I just brought on who I thought was good for the business, but I involve everybody in that decision, because when there's 5 of you, if there's one person that nobody likes, that's a bit of negativity in the whole business.
Yeah.
So it's really important that everybody kind of gets on. We're spread across, I say spread across the UK. There's 3 of us in Sussex, but the idea is that when we hire, you don't have to be in Brighton. We're working with data. That database could be anywhere. So we don't need a physical office. In fact, I don't want a physical office more than anything. I'm quite happy being at home. I'm in Platform 9 in Brighton now, but the co-working aspect of that is good. I can come in here, I can sit on a big table, I can network while I work. We've got business from actually just sitting in Platform 9 and just chatting to people. So we don't need to have a big office. You know, we're all about the UK, which means that when you're hiring, you can find the right person, the right talent. But when we do get together, we all get on, and I think that's really important, because
that's one huge benefit I think to the distributed working model, or the remote working model, whatever you want to call it, is the ability to find talent. And I think it also levels the playing field. Like, I've spoken about this on numerous occasions about how I think that when we talk about diversity, inclusion, and things like that, actually one of the big drivers for that is this kind of model, because suddenly it opens up the door to anyone being able to work for you, regardless of their background. Especially if I remember working with an organization where there was a big push to try and find new staff who were working in impoverished areas, to try and give them the opportunity. These are people that otherwise wouldn't have been able to afford to get to an interview, wouldn't have been able to afford the pressure of buying a nice shirt, or whatever, to come to the interview, to take time out of their current job or whatever it might be. Suddenly it's an interview, takes place over Zoom at an hour that suits them, around their workplace. They don't have to come, they don't have to spend the money on, what I mean? Even that is like a really big thing. I think it's massively underrated we talk about the convenience of it and the lack of commute and everything, but actually being able to find really amazing talent that ordinarily others wouldn't be able to find, and just being able to spread the net to the whole of the UK or even further afield, like that's valuable, really, really valuable, I think. But
I'm really glad you said that, actually. I just need to plug in. I've just suddenly realized I should plug in. So obviously all these things happen in real time. We're real people that need to charge our laptops. Try not to show you the contents of my bag too much. I take it out. I just need to refill of water. So let's just do all of the boring plugging in bits and make sure that this carries on. But I do want to touch upon that diversity once I've done this, because I think I was having a chat with somebody last night about it. It's really important. So just bear with me while I find the socket. Better?
There we go. That's good. That's it. We're back.
So I think that diversity and inclusion's a really good point. I was talking to somebody about this last night, and I think a lot of people, when it comes to what's diversity like in our organization, a lot of people think about age, gender balance, and maybe disability as well. But there's so much more to diversity and inclusion. It's also background, and I'm quite big. So we've got somebody in our organization, a story that we use quite often. Somebody said, I think this is like the best story and shows what you're about as people and as a business. So when we hired our last person, and we're just looking, when we put a job spec out, really we're looking for somebody that can do the job. And it's not just about, you're brilliant at this, you're brilliant at that, brilliant at the other. Obviously you need to be good at what you do, but there's so many things involved. We put a job spec out and we're looking for a data scientist, somebody that could come in, possibly lead conversations with clients and actually build the models. And they're hard to find, because you can find people that got tech skills, but maybe not all of the personable skills to go out there and talk about it. And I spoke to somebody that I knew from a networking event, said, I think I know the person that would be really good for you, and I think I should put you in touch with them. But I need to let you know that this person, she's a teacher at the moment. She's not a data scientist. She's taught herself how to do some of these things, but she's not got the experience that you might necessarily want. And I said, well, you know what, let's have a conversation, because it's really about people that can come in and do the job. And the passion that she showed from moment one that we started talking of, yeah, I'm not there yet, but I've done all this stuff. I've been teaching myself in the evening. I've been sitting here doing courses online. I've been working hard, been doing all of these things. And the passion that she showed to actually teach herself how to do some of the modeling, some of the data science skills, but also the fact that she was a teacher and the transferable skills there that she can bring to being able to go out there and explain things to people were probably better than we've seen from anybody that's been in the business or anybody that we've had here. So when you're building a team, that diversity aspect, it's not just about age and gender. Think about the background as well. You don't want to build a team of 5 people that are the same. What can everybody bring to the room? So, our diversity and inclusion bit was giving somebody that hasn't got the tech background the chance, but has so many other transferable skills to bring into the industry. And that's helped us because we're looking at things from a different perspective now as well. And then, her contacts are very different to our contacts. So it evolves who knows about what we do.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I suppose, another way to look at diversity, like the way I always like looking at diversity is about opportunity, right? So diversity of opportunity, more than anything else, that in some ways automatically feeds into the more traditional view of diversity and inclusion. But you're right. Another way to look at it is almost, the diversity of skill set. Right. So it's yes, we know that this role requires X, Y, and Z skill in order to fulfill the job. But what else can be brought to the table that supplements that, or maybe instead of that we hadn't considered? Actually, it might be that we you come across a candidate, by the sounds of it, in this case, this is what happened, where you didn't realize that was a skill that you really desperately wanted and could really be valuable to the company. But it is, and I think the skill of being I spoke about this actually in the last podcast. I think it's coming out tonight, actually, this one, which was, I think a really underrated skill, for example, is just being really easy to work with, right? Like, hugely underrated skill. But another hugely underrated skill, actually, I think is the ability to both learn and the ability to teach, like 2 really underrated skills. And you had that in a very literal sense of a teacher, but it's not always that obvious, I don't think, and it's hard to pull that out sometimes from people. But those that are the ones that are striving for the opportunity where they don't have it often are the ones that usually have that, because they are teaching themselves and they're more than happy more so often to teach others. So that's it's an interesting thing, but it's hard. I think one of the challenges there, though, I don't know if you've got any advice to this or ever thought about it, but is it, how do you find these people? Obviously, that was a bit of a perfect storm. It was just a bit of a coincidence, but someone knew someone. But if you're a business and you're trying to find people like that, it's difficult, isn't it? I mean, how do you find them? Just like I spoke about that example earlier about with a company trying to find those in more impoverished areas. That was a real challenge because we're more often than not, you're putting job postings on LinkedIn, on Indeed, and these aren't places that people go to in those situations. More often than not, they don't know about that. They don't have the means to do that. So it's not easy. I don't know if you've come across sort of similar things before, either in your current business or in previous roles. But I don't know. Have you got any sort of any insight into sort of how to expand that, especially working in a distributed model? The opportunity is there, but how do you reach out to these furthest reaches of this? You know what I'm trying to say.
I know it's brilliant, because I had this chat with somebody yesterday as well. So it's kind of on topic. Now, I would say when we put a job post out, it goes out on LinkedIn and Indeed. That's exactly what we do. And the candidates, the applicants that you get are all, they are pretty much exactly the same. Out of the 5 people that we've got, I've only ever hired one of them from a job spec on LinkedIn or Indeed. So you put the job spec out, you get the same candidates. What you should be doing is, again, calling upon your network. Look at your black book and your network. Who do you know? A bit like a good client is a client that comes through recommendation and word of mouth. It's really likely that a good candidate is a candidate that comes through recommendation and word of mouth. Who do people know? So going back to the example of our maths teacher, that was through somebody that I've met at networking. Somebody else that we've hired is through one of my friends who's got his own business. Similar kind of thing to what we do, ever so slightly different. He was hiring, and again, he'd hired a few people, but then this person came through the door just after he'd hired and said, here's a really good CV. I've had a chat with this guy. But, if we could have done, we would have hired as well. but it might be really good for you. So again, it's that recommendation, word of mouth. So look to your network, get your network to share that. Who do they know? And I think it sets that conversation off on the right footing as well. You know, with LinkedIn or Indeed, I've met a lot of candidates through there, and 90% of them are very similar, particularly in the data world. Very technical, very good, but they'll sit in the corner and they'll get the work done. And that's just not what we're all about. We want to go and give people the actionable insight. So your network's really important. In terms of kind of where else you can advertise apart from kind of the standard places, even going through like the co-working community here is quite good, because again, this is quite a big community in Brighton. You've got different people with different backgrounds here as well, so that's quite good. But yeah, calling upon your communities is valuable and vital, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I was going to ask you something, and it just left my brain just at that last point, because it made me think of another question. Too many questions. I need to write them down. I say this every time I do this. I should write them down, but I don't want it to start getting too formalized then. Do you know what I mean? Like if I write it down, it's going to feel like, like an interview or something. I don't want it to be like that, but maybe I should, because I keep forgetting stuff. But yeah, no, it's an interesting challenge. I think it's I mean, especially for what you do. Obviously, there are very specific skills that you need, obviously, to a degree. But you're also looking for very sort of the softer skills. That's what I was going to say. That there is a problem with LinkedIn though, which is that why it's great for networking and it's great for a lot of things. Like my business thrives on LinkedIn, and I really love it for those reasons. I think the one problem that it has is it lacks personality. So it's very difficult to, if you look at someone's profile, get a sense of someone beyond just their professional selves, because it isn't really designed for that, right? There's the whole, this isn't Facebook mob on LinkedIn for that reason, right? But those that stand out, I think, are those that are a bit more creative with the content that they're putting out there. And so, I think that it's in the same way that, you're saying going to a networking event and talking a bit more on a personal level. I think if people do that a bit more with their LinkedIn, they'll get the same sort of results, actually, being a little bit more personal and being a little bit more like, just putting their likability across and a bit more vulnerability and putting themselves out there. It does help for that reason. Like there's a lot of gurus out there talking about personal brand online and so on. That's essentially what it comes down to. It's not about, actually having to, put 2 to 3 pieces of content out a day and the whole Gary V thing of like this, that, and the other. It's just about letting people to know that you're an actual human being, right? And that people might connect with you on some level of like, oh, I like kayaking too. Or you know what I mean? Like that's all it is. It doesn't need to be crazy, but like it's the same thing, except it's just instead of a room in a hotel that's being hired out, it's the internet. Like it's the same thing, right? Yeah. It's just a much bigger version of that. But no, it's very interesting. So it's really exciting where you're going with things for the business. Like, what's do you have any? You mentioned about the courses, for example. That's what I was going to ask about. So do you have any plans to revisit those and kind of expand your offering beyond what you're currently doing, or is it really just to focus on, like you said, sort of going with the flow? You got these clients lined up, and you're just going to see how it goes. So you say you don't have too many solid plans, but do you maybe have some to sort of branch out into other areas?
Yeah, so I think definitely with the training courses that we do, we are going to push to market those a bit better, because people want them, people need them, and there's a lot out there where I think people just outprice themselves in the market when it comes to training. They think, oh yeah, people need this, they want it so much, and actually, training courses are very profitable. You write them once and you deliver them 100 times, but we're in a world where people want and need those skills. We're quite happy to train them, and we won't make them cost the earth, because it's more about empowering people to work in data. So we are going to revisit that. As I say, we're doing some work to train people in the NHS over the next month or so, and we're going to use that because we've spent a bit more time looking at the content of these courses. How can we then go and take them to market and talk to more people about actually getting involved and becoming better versions of themselves, or better analysts? So we will revisit that. Our tech communities are really good places to start with that. So we'll start talking more to those communities about what we can do. In terms of kind of generally our offering and what we can do for people, I think it's quite often our offering might expand off the back of a bit of work that we do, because every problem is different. So if somebody comes to us with a challenge or a problem, but whoa, we've not solved a challenge like that before, but it's possible because these are the ways, you can normalize this problem in this way and we can actually come up with a solution. And then you build that solution and think, well, what else can we do? How else can we use this? So, quite often you kind of grow by your own growth almost. And I think that's where we're going with it, kind of what we've done, how can we then turn that into a product?
Yeah, sometimes you don't really add a string to your bow until you're asked to, right?
Yeah.
So and then like you said, then it can be used for multiple situations. What sort of spurred on the working with the NHS? Do you have a previous connection there? Like how did that come about?
Yeah, so the NHS got a massive community of analysts, and as we know, I think the NHS is really poor. I'm gonna give a pouring out advert for the NHS analyst community here, but and I go to there's a big tech conference in London that happens every year. So it's a tech conference for people that code in R. It's very specific, but I've been going ever since it started, and it's the best 2 days if you're an R programmer. You meet other like-minded.
It's R React.
R and React are different things. R is the letter R, a language. React is more kind of programming that you can build fancy visuals off the back of it as well. So that's so different.
I've learned something new today. I thought it stood for React. That's all, because I've heard of that.
Yeah. I'm actually wearing the conference T-shirt of all things as well. No advertising taking place there. So go to Earl with the R being R. I'm not sponsored or anything like that, but just put this on this morning, and you meet people, and one of the people I met a few years ago runs the NHS R community, tech community, which is now expanding into other languages. So that we really need people to give up, a day or two a year to come and train us. And at last year's conference, he stood up and gave a talk, and I think what he said was really powerful. He said that the NHS is broke. We know the NHS, everyone knows this. And there are about 40 or 50 people sitting in the room. And he said, if every person in this room gave 1 day a year to the NHS to train us, we would help you in better ways. We would be able to improve that service, because if we've got 50 days of analyst training a year, they'll be able to look at the numbers. They'll be able to tell the hospitals, the doctors, the government what we can be doing to make this organization better. And sort of that powerful note really sung to me and said, well, look, there's 5 people in our company. We can give up 5 days a year and just do 5. We can train whatever they want. We can teach these analysts how to do it. And what does it really cost us to give up 5 days, each of us giving up 1 day of our work time a year to do that? And that's really what spurred that on. It's just giving back to the NHS. I think a lot of people, a business has got to be profitable, but what can you do to your community as well? What can you give back? Community is one of, as you're probably beginning to guess, it's one of the values that sits at the heart of our business. We've built our communities in Brighton. We're going about it in Manchester, and now we're giving back to, arguably the UK's biggest community that's out there.
And you're actually acting on your values, which is more than a lot of businesses can say, as opposed to just having it on a fancy plaque in their office, right? Which is really important. You mentioned earlier about the learning curve you had when starting the business. Having to learn about a lot of the less interesting aspects of running a business, right up to kind of where you are now. What would you say? Because I know this is always an interesting thing to ask when I have founders on. What would you say is sort of the area that you learned the most about? What was the most surprising things that you've learned in your journey so far in starting and running a business? And what out of that would you say are some valuable lessons that you could impart to someone else maybe starting their own journey?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a big question.
I know it is. Yeah.
There's so much that you can touch upon. So maybe we'll just get the boring bits out the way first. So just learning more about business expenses, VAT, the boring things like that. And I had no idea about finance and what you can claim back, what's a relevant expense, what's an asset as well. So you can claim back VAT on certain items, but if you buy a laptop or if you buy a projector, that becomes an asset and that becomes so much more valuable, and the business can treat it in a different way. So just really boring finance things like that, and the importance of them, the importance of things like HR as well. Getting an HR tool, HR software is really, as soon as you've got a few people in your business, get an HR tool. You can get the one that we've got is like £2 per user per month. It's dirt cheap, but it's one place to store everything. You know, when it was 2 or 3 of us, everyone had a contract that was a Word or a PDF document. I had a spreadsheet for holidays. I had, you know, timesheets for people filling out a spreadsheet. You had people's personal records that kind of sat just on their CV. So lots of different things in different places. It normalizes it. You have a tool. It tells you who's in the office. It tells you you can record absence, sicknesses. It just makes life so much easier.
What tool do you use?
We use a tool called Citrus HR.
Okay,
It's relatively basic. But it serves the purpose for us as a business. And this was just through recommendation. Again, reach out to our community here in Platform 9. What do people use?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, it's changed our life, but our CRM has changed our life. That's a different story. But yeah, getting an HR tool was really important. And then touching upon it, getting a CRM. Now, we're a data business, so obviously data is really important to us, and data capture is really important. But the number of businesses that we thought, oh, we haven't got a CRM yet. We've got a few spreadsheets. Have a CRM and use it. So our CRM is our life. It's not just a CRM. We use it as our project board as well. So what projects have we got going on? And you can tag your clients into those projects. So it's this project with this client. You can put all your deliverables on there. We've got a sales pipeline on there. We've got all of our events on there. Everything is all in one place. I'm a big believer in tech simplicity. So don't have as few tools as possible to do as much of your business as possible. So our HR tool and our CRM tool, that is 90% of this business, you know. And obviously you've got Outlook and Teams, but Outlook, it interacts with the CRM, so I kind of think of them as one.
Which CRM do you use?
So we use a CRM called Capsule. So we got that through the it's through the government Help to Grow scheme. You can get a voucher to get a discounted rate for the first year on the CRM. And again, for Capsule, it's not the most expensive CRM that's out there. It's not a HubSpot. It's not Salesforce. We don't need that for the size of business that we are. But we just need something that we can store contacts. We can store notes on those contacts. We can store emails. And it works for us. So there'll be people out there thinking, oh my God, like HubSpot, that's £600 a month or whatever. Like, you don't need that. So some people need it, obviously, but you don't all need that. Go out and find something that suits your needs as a business. And we've looked at quite a few of them. So if people just want advice or support on what CRM should I choose, we can give you some advice. So there's all the boring admin bits. And then I think in terms of just general advice to people that are, you know, on the more harder skills of business, so things like sales and marketing, which are really important things to do when you're going out there and talking to people and you're at a networking event and you've got a potential lead. Keep the conversation going and don't let a conversation go dry. If you said to somebody, we can work together, and you said that here's the solution, this is how much it costs, make sure that you talk to them over the first week or the first 2 weeks after you've given them that particular, here's a proposal, here's what we can do. Because the second you say to somebody, this is our solution, it's going to cost you 10 grand, it's like a ticking time bomb almost. And you know, every day that is not signed off is a day that it's less likely to be signed off. So, you know, make sure that you're follow up. And that's something our CRM has been really good for, because we can set up like a process in there. So it's just, you get a lead, you sent them something, you follow up 2 days later. So it makes sure that happens.
Like a cadence. Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. You know, that's something that, it's almost forgotten about in even mainstream enterprise sales, which is that the moment you give a quote is usually the end of the conversation, talking about how you can solve the problem, right? So that the moment that stops, then every moment that passes is them forgetting the value that is involved in that quote. So let's say it's 50 grand. Like every day that passes, they're forgetting what that 50 grand is worth, essentially, like, in simple terms. Not to mention there's the problem of, multiple stakeholders. Usually the bigger business has multiple stakeholders. So multi-threading is a really important part of that sales process, where you're keeping everyone else in the decision-making team involved, even if they didn't attend, and things like that. There's a lot of great, skills that, I obviously get involved with businesses to talk about, and that's very important. Very, very important bit of advice you've given there when working at this sort of level. Having a good tool definitely helps with that, because not everyone can remember to do these things manually, like, especially when you're doing a certain amount of quotes a day or a week. Like, there's no human being alive that can remember, oh, I've got to email them, I've got to call them. Like, so it all comes together, doesn't it?
Yeah, totally.
Anything else that springs to mind that's maybe a bit of a hard lesson or something that you've learned? That, I mean, especially when it comes to culture, right? You touched on a couple of the issues there around building a team, even a small one, and how the intimate nature of that can be quite difficult at times, especially if you get the wrong hire in and so on. Is there anything you've learned around that you found to be quite valuable?
Yeah, particularly as a small business, make sure everybody's involved. If you're hiring somebody, it doesn't really cost you that much money. Make sure that everyone's had a chat with somebody that you want to bring into a team. If you're a team of 100, bringing in 101 is, you can't do that, and you don't need to do that. But when you're a team of 4 people, I'll even do it. When we were a team of 3, bringing in number 4, it was, we had some good candidates. There was one candidate that maybe rubbed 1 or 2 people up the wrong way in the interview process, and so it wouldn't have been a really good culture fit to bring that person in. So make sure everybody's involved, but also when you have a team, trust and empower that team as well. I think that's really important. So you don't need to, the way that we do things here, we work hours, not days. So you've got to work a certain number, so you've got to work 36 hours a week. You could work, some people work them over 4 days, as long as you're available to come on client calls and get your deliverables done in time. But it's not about that whole, man management thing. I've got a kid at school, so I'll take him to school in the morning, I'll pick him up in the afternoon. Somebody else in the business has got that as well. And you can be totally flexible and work around that. It's totally fine to say to a client, look, I can't do a call at 3 o'clock because I've got to pick my child up from school, but I could do it at 3:30 or 2 o'clock. So trust people, let them work the hours that suit them, because they'll get the best work done. But just make sure there are mechanisms in place. We've had it before as well, where some people, you give them that trust. Most people, 99% of the people will be trustworthy, but sometimes people, unfortunately, not everybody is as trustworthy as you want them to be. So make sure there's mechanisms in place. Make sure that you've got the right tech set up on your laptop, that if things do happen and need to happen, that you still have that element of control without being controlling.
You told me before, but how old is your boy or a girl, by the way? Sorry.
Boy.
How old is he?
He's 6 now.
6 now. Yeah. Very cool. And you only have the one, right?
I need the one. Yeah.
So stick with that. Can tell you sorry, just had a second. One is more than enough. And are you married or?
Yes. Yeah.
How long have you been married for?
Been married, well, this year it'll be 13 years.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
Long, fruitful marriage.
Yeah.
Wow, fantastic. And I mean, I think that there's probably more valuable insight you could give us into running a successful marriage, I think, than a business, to be honest, these days. That's pretty impressive. How do you remember, like, how you guys met, and like, how did that all come about?
God, yeah. I mean, we're going back to almost pre-career time, but
was this like a university?
It was a university thing, but not at university. So it was through a social meetup and a friend in common that we met back again X number of years ago, where we won't talk about what X is, but yeah. So that happened, and we were friends for a bit first. We actually didn't, it wasn't straight away that we started dating each other or doing anything like that. And so we were friends for a little bit, and then that kind of blossomed, and then a few years later we got married, and then did what we needed to do, and then had a kid. But yeah, it is. Even going back to the business, and somebody said to me, it feels like a family business. My wife does get involved with some of the more boring admin bits that I spoke about before, has taken that off my hand. So yeah, and I think for us, one of the big spurs in the marriage and starting a business. So I will talk a little bit about my personal story here, because I think we're it's not just about business, there's people that sit behind that. So we're living in Brighton, and we're both from London, both from North London. And when we started dating, we used to come down to Brighton quite a bit for short breaks, weekends, a little bit of time to relax and recuperate. And it was always the plan, what, one day we'll move to Brighton, and it'll probably be when we retire. It'll just be this thing that happens one day. And back in the year that my son was born, so going back to 2016, 3 months before my son was born, my father passed away suddenly, like that. It was ill overnight, and then the next day he was gone. And obviously didn't. It's one of those things when you tell the story and people just don't know what to say as well. But it just happened. Didn't have a chance to say goodbye or anything like that. Got a phone call when I was sitting at work eating my lunch, ran out of work, and but that was it. And at the time, my mother she had been quite unwell for a few years with cancer, but had got to the point that she was managing it quite well. My dad passing away like that was a massive shock, particularly to all these people saying to me at the time, you're going to have your son in a few months' time, when you was going to be a boy, and that's your way of carrying the legacy on. And it was just after his first birthday, in the year, so it's almost a year after my father passed, my mother couldn't cope with her illness anymore. It was just, the massive shock of what had happened. And so she passed a year later. So my parents were quite young, late 60s and early 70s. And, obviously sold their house, and we thought, we've got a child, we need more space. So let's buy a house. But hang on a minute, there's my wife's family they were all moving towards the south coast for one reason or another. It's like, hang on a minute, if we do buy a house, we don't actually need to buy it back in Watford where we were. This could be our opportunity. So we moved to Brighton, the city that we loved, 5 years ago, roughly to the day. And I don't think I'd ever look back and go back to London. I'm telling you that honestly, particularly if you look at lockdown. Imagine lockdown in London or in Watford with a beautiful ring road to walk around. We've got the sea and we've got the downs here. So I don't think I'd ever look back.
Yeah. My condolences. That sounds like a horrible time, but certainly a time that meant new beginnings, right? And so that's a wonderful outcome from that. The South Coast is wonderful. There's a reason why it's called the Sunshine Coast, which I know for anyone listening overseas probably scoffs at that, knowing that this is in England. But it's our equivalent of the Sunshine Coast. All right, let us have that. But yeah, Brighton's awesome. We don't get there often enough. The wife, she's from Brighton originally, and her family, her mum and dad live in Brighton. And so we go there every occasion, obviously visit the in-laws and stuff. But I prefer Eastbourne though, because it's a bit quieter.
It's funny you should say that. So when we actually first started dating, my brother was at University of Brighton Eastbourne campus. So we would come down and see him a lot in Eastbourne, and we did that for about a year, and then obviously he wasn't there anymore, so we didn't go. And then when lockdown finished, and when you could go out, you could spread your wings and leave your bubble or whatever it was, and we thought, we just want a few days away to chill and relax. And we thought, we don't want to go too far, we don't want this to be a massive effort, it's sort of spur of the moment, let's go to Eastbourne. We haven't been there for 15 years, and we went there for a couple of days, and just totally, when you live in Brighton, I totally love Eastbourne. I don't think I'd move there and live there, but I totally love the fact that it's quiet, it's relaxed. We had a few days after lockdown where we just walked along the seafront and it was peaceful, whereas you did that in lockdown in Brighton, it wasn't. And we've been going back to Eastbourne ever since, for the past few years, for a quiet break. and I love it. I just love, I love the peace, the tranquility. The seafront in Eastbourne is beautiful.
It's really
You know,
nice. Yeah.
and you don't. Brighton's very buzzing, very happening. You don't quite get maybe the beauty that you get of Eastbourne seafront. So
I think it's just a lot more going on, so you don't really have the time
Yeah.
to soak it all up. But
Yeah.
I mean, like driving to and from Brighton when I do on occasion, you know, it is an absolutely stunning place, beautiful. I mean, I love the culture there, the nightlife, the shops, like everything about it is amazing. But I think, I suppose from my perspective, I grew up in Oxford originally, right, and quite a busy, you know, city, I guess, you know, technically not a city, but everyone always refers it as a city. It reminds me, Brighton reminds me a lot of Oxford, actually, in that sense. Like, it's very mixed culturally, you know, a lot of quirky areas, a lot of really old architecture, you know, mixed in with it, you know, very eclectic. But for the same reason I moved out of Oxford, there's something about, I think it's maybe because in my younger days, I went straight into the hospitality industry, right? And, you know, doing that was partying hard for a very solid amount of years. And so it kind of got to a point where I'm like, I've got that all out of my system now. I want peace. I want quiet. Like, you know, so there's something about sort of very, very busy, dense areas, which kind of gets me a bit claustrophobic now, I think. And so now it's, I kind of like the OAP lifestyle. You know,
Eastbourne's up and coming though. There's plenty of nice things to do there. Like even when we go there with child, there's so much. There's so much to do, but there's so much to be thankful for and rest and relax for as well.
Absolutely, that is a bit of a misconception, actually, isn't it? That Eastbourne is just, you know, a God's resting place, and there's not much going on. There is plenty going on, especially for kids. Actually, you're right. There's a lot of family stuff, especially this time of year. All of that comes to life, and there's so many different activities going on. The council is really great here. They put on so many different, a lot like Brighton. In fact, I know that to be true for a lot of East Sussex. The councils in East Sussex are generally really proactive, actually, always putting on events, always, you know, they're really good from a community standpoint. So we're very fortunate in that regard, for sure. Are you attending, or do you know of DigiFest that's happening in Eastbourne?
I've heard of it. So I am connected with a few businesses in Eastbourne through networking. So I've heard of it. I can't confess I know a lot, but I definitely should know a lot more.
Yeah, well, it's just our first digital festival, essentially. You know, a lot of just the focus around it, because there, like you know, there are these communities that are close by, like Silicon Brighton, and, you know, the Chalk and a few others. And I think it's kind of sparked this community in Eastbourne that's been building over the last few years of technical individuals and founders, you know, it's just finally turning into an event, and it's quite exciting for Eastbourne to have its first one. So if you can make it, you should definitely come down. Plenty of others that have been on this show are coming down. We're going to meet in person for the first time, and other people in the networks that I've met, you know, over the years. So it's it's quite exciting. There are people traveling, you know, quite far afield actually for it, which is nice to hear for us. You know, sleepy little seaside town for people to be coming down and experiencing it sometimes for the first time. Although it is surprising how many people I speak to all across even the world, actually, that have said they've been to Eastbourne. Like, I didn't realize that it had the level of popularity it had for some people, or at least people have heard of it, which is odd, because it's just like, you know, I always thought I was the place between Brighton and Hastings. No one would have heard of it, but actually people know of it, because it's but so that's good. But no, that's wonderful. I'm really glad that you're very, you know, you're enjoying Brighton and the seaside lifestyle as well. You know, that's a big one too. And you said you couldn't envisage yourself moving back to London, no?
I couldn't see it happening. Also, bringing up a child by the sea. I remember last year on the last day of the school year, and somebody in my son's class had a birthday, or it was their birthday in the summer holidays, but, you know, everyone's away. So what better day than the last day of the school year to hold your birthday party? And the birthday party was, you know, playing on some of the, it was just really simple, going to the arcades on the seafront and then sitting and having a picnic on the beach. And it's, you can't do that in London. You know, you can't on the last day of school just go and sit on the beach. The adults get to have a beer or a glass of wine, and the kids are having some food and drink and playing on the arcades. That's something you can only do at the seaside. And
you know, the equivalent to that in London is, go to the local casino and then go
Yeah.
and sit in the park with some
Yeah.
tinnies. Like,
Exactly.
Yeah,
So yeah, definitely would never look back. I couldn't leave. I couldn't. We love Brighton and Hove too much to leave Brighton and Hove, but at the same time, I think it's, as long as we're by the seaside. Like I say, I can't envisage living in Eastbourne, but you never know.
Yeah, I quite like Saltdean, just outside. That's really
Yeah.
nice little area as well. But yeah, in regards to just sort of going back briefly to, if you may indulge me, to what you mentioned about a couple of things, sort of bringing them together, about starting the business when you did, and those events that happened sort of leading up to you moving to Brighton. How much of those events that led up to that, becoming a father, losing your parents, how much of that do you feel sort of contributed to the catalyst of wanting to start the business and move things forward? Do you think that any of that contributed, or was that kind of arbitrary?
No, I think it all contributed. These are all things. If some of those things didn't happen, so I think if I was still working so moving to Brighton, first of all, I'll touch upon the bits that happened before we moved to Brighton. Moving to Brighton was a big thing. In the first year that we moved here, my son was, 18 months old when we moved down here, roughly. And I was still commuting to London. It was one of those. You move to Brighton, you think, it'll be fine. I can do the commute, no problem. Anybody that's local might remember the big Southern Thameslink timetable change that was billed as, this is taking it into the 21st century. It's going to be amazing. It wasn't amazing. We moved to Brighton a week before that timetable change. So I had my first week of commuting. This is all right. And the big timetable change is coming. It's going to get better. I was going to have a direct train from Hove to City Thameslink where I commuted to, rather than changing at Brighton. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be better. It wasn't. And I spent a year commuting. Now the idea was 3 or 4 days a week with 1 or 2 days a week at home. Oh, you've got to remember, this is pre-pandemic, so most people were going into the office. And even at 3 days a week, which often became 4, it was just soul destroying. I spent 4 hours of my day commuting. So if you do that, let's say you do it even 3 times a week, that's 12 hours of your week you're spending commuting, 2 hours each way. I didn't see my son. He was 18 months old. I'd get up, he'd be asleep, and I'd get back home, he'd be going to bed. So I didn't see him. And it was... for me, I felt I can't do this anymore. That also, those 12 hours, that was on, perfect timing. Things happened with the trains. Trains got delayed. Trains got cancelled. Points failures, all the nonsense that you get. So I was just spending more than that 12 hours commuting, not seeing my son. And I just felt something's got to change. I just can't do this anymore. But I really loved the job I was working in. The company I was working, it's been through an exciting rebrand, moved to a new office. And I knew that whilst I loved the job, I didn't love the commute. So I had to change it. Now, Brighton, at that point when we moved down here, the tech community wasn't what it was now. Silicon Brighton have done a great job in that. When I moved down here, there were 3 tech meetups. With Silicon Brighton, there's over 20 now. But I knew that it was going to be hard. There weren't people that wanted data scientists and data people in Brighton. So I started approaching companies. I went with the idea that if I approach people, I'm just seeing if somebody's going to try and come and sit in the booth, I think. So I'm just going to move some things around. There we go. Move all that around. Right. So I thought, I've got to start approaching companies and say, this is what I do. Can I help you? What can we do together? And took about 6 months, and eventually I landed a role in Brighton. And that was a big thing, even though it was just before the pandemic. It got rid of that 4 hours. And that 4 hours gave me the chance to sit at home and think, A, see my son, and B, think about my business. So I think if we didn't move to Brighton, I was in a job that I loved, in a company that I loved, but I might not have started the business. Obviously, that big thing of cash in the bank, we wouldn't have had a buy-to-let property if my parents didn't pass. So that was our way of investing in our future. The buy-to-let is a pension pot. Obviously, there's a real pension pot as well, but it's a second pension pot. So having that ability to do that was only spurred by the sad events that happened in 2016, 2017. So I think everything coming together has really been like the motivation behind starting my business. Like this, I'm convinced if we were still in London, this wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? How sometimes comfort can be the killer of innovation, right? It's just if everything is comfortable, although it may not be ideal, although it may not be what you really want, it's not going to push you to strive for anything else, right? But the moment things start becoming uncomfortable, then we tend to try and find alternatives, rightly or wrongly, but sometimes it can work out for the best. So well, as we're approaching on the last 10 minutes, what I usually like to do in this last 10 minutes is ask my guests to give some tips out, like about to potential founders out there. But we kind of already covered that earlier on. So I was thinking instead, how about we just spend the last 10 minutes talking a bit more about what kind of because there's obviously a lot of founders that might be listening to this. Well, I know a lot of founders listening to this. What sort of founders out there should be getting in touch with you? What sort of problems would they be encountering? What kinds of problems would they maybe looking to solve? What are the kind of ideal customers essentially that should be coming to you to solve certain problems? Why don't we lay that out for them?
Yeah. Well, let's lay it out in terms of the three things I spoke about. So the customers, the marketing, and the automation. Let's start with automation first, because I think that's really key.
So we didn't touch on that as well. I wasn't wanting to ask about them.
So let's touch upon automation. Every business has got this painful process. So think about processes that are within your business at the moment. What do you or somebody in your team, somebody in your business, what is it that somebody spends a long time doing that is potentially quite manual? So hopefully no one can hear all the drilling in the background that's just started.
No, it's not coming
It's
through.
incredible how good people tell me this mic is, because
it's very good.
The background noises. So what painful process have you got in your business? There's something, maybe somebody stitches together 3 or 4 spreadsheets every week to put a simple report together of how many customers we've got, what we've sold in the past week, and where our people are. And it might take them a long time to put that together. You shouldn't be doing that anymore. We're in an age where things can be automated. We have fantastic coding languages, and at Datacove we have all the skills to navigate around those languages, so we can build you something that takes that 20 hours out forever. So imagine that person getting 20 hours of their week back. They can spend that looking at the report that we produce and saying, okay, this is great. Now I know that my customers in Bristol and Brighton, I'm going around Bristol and Brighton to find more of them. But they don't have that time beforehand because they're spending so long putting the report together. So if you've got that process within your business, and we all have one, it might not be the exact process that I talked through just now. We've all got something that takes us so long. We can automate that for you. And more importantly, it pays for itself. You'll spend some money with us to be able to write the code and to be able to implement that code and automate it. But remember, that 20 hours is gone forever. So within the first few months, it starts paying for itself because you're focusing your attention on something else. So think about your process, get in touch, tell me why it's painful. We'll sit and look through you doing that process as well, so that we can understand where the pain lies and what we can automate. So I think that's the first thing. If we come to customer analytics and customer data, it's really simple. If you're listening, I just want to ask you a couple of questions. If you're listening, if you're watching, so I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and if you can't answer these questions, then I want you to get in touch. So the first question is, who's your customer? Who are they? Do you know who your customer is? And the second and perhaps equally important question is, what's your best product? So what product have you got within your business? What's your best seller? What product are people coming to you again and again for? And again, I'll give a really simple example. It's actually not a piece of our analysis. It's analysis from another business, but somebody touched upon. They gave me this example at a business networking event, and I thought, it's so simple. My one involves like Oyster card wallets, but this one's even better. And he did some analysis for a cafe, and he went into the cafe and said, so what's your best product? And they said, oh, it's, Sandwich X, it's let's say it's a cheese and pickle sandwich. I don't know what it was. Actually, no, it's a cup of tea. The thing that people buy the most is a cup of tea. So when they're buying this cheese and pickle sandwich that you think is the best-selling product, ask if they want a tea with it. Yeah, really simple, and it's just tangible. I had another one where somebody's biggest product, they thought it was a handbag, and it's actually the Oyster card wallet. And so, you know, again, upselling the basket. Do you want an Oyster card wallet with that? But you're often surprised what your best product is. So if you don't know who your customer is and you don't know what your best product is, get in touch, because we can help you look at your data and analyze that.
And when you're saying, you know who your customer is, you mean very specifically, not just, broadly. You're talking about specifics, because everyone, I think, has a broad idea of who their customer is, their ideal customer profile or who they want their customer to be. But actually, that you're talking about, very specific attributes.
The more you know about your customer, the better. Are you talking to them? Are you surveying your customers as well? Customer surveys are really important, but use that. Don't ask them what made them buy the product. What do you like about us as a brand? Ask them about them. We've got a really good client, do a really good survey where they ask customers more about their beliefs and kind of what excites them, what they do at the weekend. Know the customer, because you don't have, people aren't going to fill out surveys unless they're sure, unless you give them incentives. So the people that do, use that to understand who they are, and we can then take that data for the people that haven't filled it out and approximate what they would say based on their behavior and based on similar people that have answered the survey. So know your customer.
And what about those sort of the very early stages of their journey as a founder? Maybe not in the position to hire someone like you. What could they maybe do, or is there any services that you could offer, or any resources you can point them to, like you said, sort of become ready and start building a bit of a data strategy?
Yeah, I think first of all, make sure you think of it in the simplest possible form. So your data strategy isn't complicated, as I said earlier on. Think about what is your business. So what are you trying to achieve? What kind of customers are you trying to get, and what do you need to know about these people? So be really basic. When you start a business, you're going to map out what your product is. So from that product, who's going to buy it? What do I need to know about these people? What do I need to know to sell it? And put yourself together a very simple strategy. Potentially, we can do some simple consultancy with you that's not going to cost you the earth, even if it's just spending like half a day with you, workshopping that out. So it doesn't cost you the earth, but we can help kind of kick some of that into place for you.
Get that journey started, kind of thing.
And I'll ask you the right questions. So you might not have data yet, but every business is going to have data. And it's also recognizing the importance of that data and not being those people that brush it under the carpet because it's scary. So embrace the data, embrace the fact that you've got it, and make sure that you use the opportunity to collect it correctly. Because if you get to the point that you got 1,000 people on your database and you haven't asked them what their job title is, and that's really important, it's so much harder to go and backfill that. Give it the time.
Will you have any type of course maybe dedicated to this sort of earlier stage situation, do you think?
We've done it for people before that want to become data driven. So again, just also talking about in data, I think in a lot of things, particularly data, marketing's another one. There's so many acronyms, there's so many buzzwords. It's just, what do the buzzwords really mean? Why are they important? What the flip is AI? What the flip is machine learning? What are all of these things? So help you understand them and when you need them. And early on in the journey, don't worry about AI. Don't worry about complex models. Just worry about the simplicity of knowing who a customer is. Your modeling can come later on as you grow as a business, but get the basics and the fundamentals right.
And you know what, you mentioned AI there, something I did even want to ask you about. We've run out of time. I wanted to ask a bit more about that and how it might be affecting your industry. But we'll have to save that for next time, I guess. That's all right. All the more reason. It's usually the way with these things. I end and there's still a whole bank of things that I wanted to ask you about. So all the more reason to connect again. But but look, if you do manage to make it down to or plan to make it down for DigiFest, if it works with your schedule, then let me know. It'd be lovely to meet for a coffee and yeah, maybe I can ask you some of these questions off camera.
I think on camera AI, it's going to get quite deep. So
yeah, it has done the last couple of times, but it's but I was more interested, as a data scientist yourself, as someone who's really in that world, that I was would have been quite a fresh take. But yeah, maybe next time, another episode. But especially in terms of how it affects your what you do and what you're working on, because I know there's a lot of correlation there, right? So, but no, look, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for joining me. I really, really appreciate it. I know how busy you are, so yeah, hugely valuable, really, really insightful stuff. And I know it's going to be very valuable to listeners out there who are either starting the journey or further along in their journey in their business and are tackling this, because if it is something that I think there isn't really talked about enough of, or at least not in the way that you put it, very simple, easy to understand and digestible. So I think that's really, really useful information. And of course, anyone listening who wants to get in touch with Jeremey, your details will be in the description, your LinkedIn and your website details and everything. So please do get in touch with Jeremey if you want more information or to have a consultation, like you say. Any final words, any parting words of wisdom that you want to share with me or anyone listening?
First of all, do get in touch. Very happy for people to get in contact. We're always happy to have a chat. And thank you, Greg. It's been an absolute pleasure. I mean, it's 2 hours have flown by. It's
they usually do, don't they?
It's been more of a conversation than anything else. So which has made it fun.
Oh, good.
And
good.
I think the one parting thing I'll leave, and it perhaps whet people's appetite for another time. So we won't touch upon AI, but I just want to say to people, don't worry about AI. Don't panic about it, because AI will not replace what you do. There will be a human that has to sit behind every piece of AI. So what we do might evolve and change, but at the end of the day, we still need humans to interpret what AI is telling us. And that's really important, the human touch. So I'm going to leave it there so that people can think a little bit more about AI and where it's going. And that's another chat for another day.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, look, thank you again so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Hopefully we'll see each other very, very soon again.
Absolutely. Brilliant.
All right. Take care.
Thanks,
and enjoy the weekend, of course. It's Friday, isn't it?
Absolutely. Why not? Let's do it.
Enjoy the sunshine and the sea.
Yeah, brilliant. Cheers, Greg.
See you later. Take care.
All right, then.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you for watching and/or listening. Please like, subscribe and join the conversation in the comments below.